Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Cutting the Grooves of History with your two sharp needles, Gavin Rice and Jack Stanley. And in this episode, we're going to dive right into the wonders of early sound recording.
Well, very good. Are you going to start off with something, or would you like me to start? How's that?
Let's have you talk a little bit about what you did and the early times of the Edison project, the recording project, and I would really like to hear your insight on that.
Okay, sure. But to get a sense of the idea of the wonder, I mean, if you think about it, first off, a recording, when it was invented, it was the closest thing to a time machine. It actually captured time, which was impossible. But, that's why he's called the Wizard of Menlo Park. It's not because of the light bulb. It's not because of anything else. It's because of the doing the impossible, recording sound. And people were shocked. People were amazed. People tried to confuse it. People spoke to it in Latin, and it didn't seem to matter. It could still repeat what they said, and they were really amazed. They said, how could an American machine do this? So, nonetheless, time went by, and the wonder of it all went on and on. And I always remember in Charlie Hummel's collection, he had a letter that was sent to Thomas Edison. And it was sent from the islands, and these were natives sending this letter. And it was addressed to the great white wizard that makes the black devil talk. And it went to Edison. They figured it out.
I think I've seen that letter too, Jack. That was remarkable. I've seen that.
I mean, when you think about it. But, I mean, sound recording is something that transitioned the world into something it never was before. You have to understand entertainment, as you are an entertainer, a musicologist. The thing is that you can play many different instruments, and years ago people used to play instruments all the time, and a home entertainment unit was your mother at a piano, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
The thing that's really amazing is that people could actually hear the sounds of great artists and singers and performers in bands, because
that's
that's
right. Yep.
available. And what it has started in the late 19th, but more a 20th century thing, is a necropolis of sound.
Ooh.
Let me repeat that. A necropolis of sound. Because if you think about it, we are entertained by the dead. Listen
True.
during the Christmas season and listen to the music. Who's singing? Me, Nat King Cole. Everybody else, they have been dead for 50, 60 years, but they are as alive as they were because of sound recording, and they're a part of our lives.
That's
and so
right.
sound recording has totally transformed humanity. And that's a very, very profound thing. Few things have had that kind of an effect. Yes, motion pictures certainly had an effect, but nothing, I repeat, nothing affected mankind as much as sound recording, because it was the first of the series of devices that would basically capture time.
That's right. That's right.
Was at first is the one that's remembered. The Titanic sank, and everybody knows about the silly Titanic. I'm sick of the Titanic, to be honest. But the thing is that every other ship, 2 years later, the Empress of Ireland sank with almost as many people, but who hears about it? Because the Titanic did it. That's the same thing with sound recording. It basically changed mankind. Now, the thing I wanted to mention was the wonder of it. I mean, think about this. It's hard to comprehend how amazing it is still to this day, if you think.
Yep.
Because it's basically something new, and we should really look at it with a sense of wonder. because now we have a sense of expectation. We don't have an understanding of wonder. We turn the switch and the light goes on. If it doesn't go on, we bitch, moan, and complain. But we don't sit there and say, wow, look at that. Isn't that amazing? The electricity gets all the way over here. We have clean water in the house and the toilet flushes. I mean, this is amazing stuff,
Mhm.
and don't have that sense of wonder anymore.
You're right. You're right.
That's the thing I wanted to talk about, that our world has changed quite a bit. And
Mhm.
we, as collective, as purveyors of sound recordings, who collect them, preserve them for future generations, because we kind of just rent them, if you think about it. As many an old collector told me, he says, I'm only here to rent it for a while. And that's so very true.
That's
And
right.
ultimately, we preserve this, we save it, and we share it, like me to you. And then you will have it for a while until you assume room temperature, and then someone else gets it, etc.
That's
And
right. That's
that's
perfect.
very important. But that's just how I wanted to start this off, is talk about how amazing this is.
Mhm. And to piggyback off of that, Jack, you're absolutely right. And what a way to start the episode. That was some wonderful words. And, that is true. As us modern Americans, we have a set of expectations. I really like that. If the clock doesn't tick, what's going on? We're never wondering. Most people don't know how the batteries go to the wires to move the hands. Nobody wonders if it's a mechanical clock about the gears, you know. But I've noticed that every time I play a young person a phonograph, they say, how does that work? What is going on? How does that play and how does it come out of the thing? People don't realize how much the phonograph changed the world. And now I want to say, um, there in Europe, before the phonograph, there was the phonautograph, but the phonautograph was not designed to play back sound. It was designed to capture sound waves. But of course, Thomas Edison thought, how about we play back the sound? Which changed, as Jack said, changed humanity and the way they thought. Because for the first time ever, especially after the introduction of the home recorder, you could hear your own voice being captured physically on a physical piece of media, and it could be played back in the exact same way as recorded.
If I
It
may
was astounding.
a second,
Sure.
the phone autograph. It's one of these things you might put in a list and put an asterisk after it, because it's never meant to reproduce sound.
Never.
It was never designed to, in a sense, capture sound to be reproduced, because they never thought of that.
Exactly.
It's by some chance that a few papers were preserved and no one understood sound waves. No one understood any of that. And it's just an amazing thing that afterwards, with technology, you could take that and make it sound. But we have to be fair and honest that that really wasn't sound recording as the idea of inventing it. It was just by chance it did something that allowed us to reproduce the sound that was captured.
Exactly.
So amazing.
And
It's still an amazing thing. I mean, to hear
of
Claire
course,
in the 1850s is pretty doggone cool. I mean,
it was pretty cool. And thanks to modern technology to be able to read the pieces of paper and to reproduce it as sound waves.
50 years ago, you couldn't do that. You could say that
Nope.
looks nice, nice
Yeah,
play.
wow. Oh,
A couple of adult beverages, and it got even more interesting.
Exactly. Exactly.
But
Well,
it's
you know,
an amazing thing that they did, and kudos to all of them.
absolutely. Um, the introduction of and especially um, Thomas Edison in his expedition in 1878, the cornet solo. Remember? Did you the cornet solo? I believe it was. It was either the Carnivals of Venice or some. It was either the Carnivals of Venice or the Seaflower Polka that the cornetist played on the tinfoil, and Thomas Edison rewound the mandrel and he played it, and the audience was blown away that a machine, they, I remember reading, or Charlie telling me that the audience, people thought that there was another cornet player, of course, but it didn't sound, like exactly like a cornet player, but it was the first time that they heard a machine play the cornet. That's why it got the name Talking Machine, because it was a machine that talked. And the Columbia Graphophone Company, when they revolutionized the cylinder and they revolutionized the recording process, for the first time you could hear Sousa's band in your own home. Now, Sousa was so popular, he toured the entire East Coast, he toured the Midwest, he toured everywhere. And to see him, you had to see him. To hear him, you had to see him. Now, the first time, you have not only John Philip Sousa, you have there's so many musicians, I can't name them all, that were recording pioneers in your own home.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what was that right then and there was that's changed not only the music industry, but that also completely changed humanity. Because now, to go see an opera, you had to get out of your old clothes, put on your evening wear, go drive or walk out to the performance hall, watch the performance, and come home late at night and fall asleep. Now, for the first time, you could have these opera singers in your home. You don't even have to change your clothes. You don't have to go anywhere.
And that led to an amazing battle between Victor and Columbia in 1903. It was the Great Opera Wars,
That's true. Yeah. Luckily, Victor had Caruso on their side.
Arians with the horns on each other, doing their thing back and forth with each other.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
Columbia actually did it first. And they took it home. And Victor went to Europe. But Victor actually won the game, of course, because
they had Caruso on their side.
No, Caruso was not the big deal yet. That's the interesting thing when this happened. Caruso was just one of many. Number 5,000 in that first operatic series is Emma Calvé. She was the biggest thing. She was the Carmen. She was this eccentric French singer who had a tremendous hissy fit when she made her first recordings, which aged the entire recording crew about 10 years, which is a story in itself we'll talk about sometime. But I'm just going on about all this. There's so many fascinating little stories.
Absolutely. And it's Victor. They had to make their own label for the opera. That was where the red came from. And that's where the red. Yeah.
As an episode that you will see eventually, we talked about this, which will be coming on shortly. But it started in Russia. That's where the red label came from. And of course, where else would you want to have red? I mean,
exactly.
Started the red label, and G&T, the gramophone typewriter company, said, hey, good deal. And they called it their personality label and celebrity label. And then when Victor got the records from G&T, they made their label red, and so did Columbia. And there was a lot of finger pointing and arguing, and Columbia changed their label to black.
That's right. And even there were not many, if any, opera singers that recorded on cylinder that I can think of.
A few.
Only a very minuscule amount, which is interesting to think about, because operas are such long passages. You would rather want that on the disc where you can hold more detail.
One thing you have to look at, in let's say the year 1900, the opera singer held the position of the Kardashians today. Okay, of various pop singers and whatever that people just sit there and drool over and will pay $5,000 for a ticket to see them. Opera singers held that status They were
That's right.
photographed constantly, talked about. What do they like to eat? You know, that kind of stuff. I mean, you had Melba toast. Um, what was the other one? Peach Melba, named for Nellie Melba. You had Tetrazzini chicken, named for Luisa Tetrazzini. You had
That's right.
Caruso, named for Enrico Caruso. You had all these different things because people just were agog with the opera singer. It was the grand age of opera. And the opera singers themselves, except for a few, kind of looked at the phonograph like it was a toy.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to allow my instrument, my voice, to be put on that. But then Caruso, who was not the first, but he was probably the most successful of the early ones, did it and made money.
Yep.
When
That's
they
right.
money, everybody said, me too, me too. And, Melba comes running and Patty comes running and Tamano comes running, and each one of them has their own labels, and they're charging $5 a record.
Wow. Yeah.
Tamano for Melba and for Patty. Think about this, $5 a record. I mean, $5 was like a weekly salary for an
I was
average.
just gonna say. I was just gonna say that was a weekly salary.
I mean, for somewhere between $1 and $2 was a main course meal at Delmonico's. Okay, we're talking. If you have the computer there,
Mhm.
look up $5 in 1904.
Oh, it's 4. Yeah. I'm gonna guess it's gonna be around
Probably like
like
170, something like that.
most definitely. Here we go. $5. $5 in 1904 is $168 today.
$168. I mean, think about that. I've got a recording of Beyonce, and it's
Right.
only $168, and it's one-sided.
Yep. That's right. You didn't have the other side exactly. That's right.
I mean, we lose track as we, look in this age. We sit there and say $5. That's nothing. It was everything, and
Yes.
it's
It was
amazing
everything.
they were able to sell as much as they could. But it was snob appeal. That's really what it was. Instead of having Dickens and Thoreau on the wall, I have Caruso, I have Melba, I have Patty, and people, then they get all excited. And it's very, very important because it changed everything. Once again, the whole atmosphere of music, the whole atmosphere of recording, the whole atmosphere of the star system changed.
Yep.
It's,
That's right.
it's, you know,
And then even later, I know we're not going to talk about too much later, but piggybacking off of that, even later, now you have musicians who get their own label.
well, that was Melba,
Exactly. Right.
Petruzzi,
Melba, and
again,
then
Melba and Tamano.
right. And then in the mid to late 20s, you had the Ted Lewis Columbias, you
Sure.
know,
Ted Lewis and the Potato Heads, right?
the Potato Head Paul Whiteman. So that the opera star in 1904 and 1903, that was the first time that musicians got their first, like, their own label, their own exclusive label. And that in the cylinder industry, nobody had, and in fact, most musicians hated recording on cylinders. John Philip Sousa called it canned music.
He didn't think much more of Victor, actually, to tell you the truth. In fact, he didn't even conduct the recordings,
Nope, he did not.
just collected
Right.
the money.
Exactly. That's right.
Once again, money. I mean, that those 5 letters have.
Mhm. Yes, it's 5.
I could do history. I can't do. I'm very good.
Me neither.
It's
Forget
5 letters. I am corrected. Okay,
it.
those 5 letters, money. I'm much better with dates. Okay.
Me too. Me too.
Um, the whole idea of money had a profound effect because that's why everybody came running. It was a gravy train.
Yep.
And you had an endless fascination of the public. And be it cylinder, be it disc, there was a lot of money being made. Edison made a
Lots.
fortune. I mean, if you think about, today, go on eBay and look up Edison machines. They're everywhere. I mean, you keep seeing standards, homes, this, that, and you sit there and you look at the numbers. Those numbers on there basically are saying how many were sold.
Yep,
And you look
that's right.
at 700,000, I'm sitting there going, holy cow. And each one was selling for, let's say, 20 some odd bucks, which, as we know already, it's
That's about
$168.
500 or
$5.
yeah.
A lot of money coming.
Oh yes. Yep.
And Edison and Victor and Columbia early on all made a lot of money, but then they all made some serious mistakes. Columbia made some very bad errors, and by 1911, 1912, they were in pretty rough shape. And Edison, once he went into the diamond disc, he became the director of artists and repertoire, which was really a joy.
Yeah.
I went
That's right.
all of his papers dealing with that. And I went. It took me like 8 months to go into, and his comments to the recording department are kind of frightening. I mean, like he would sit there and say, she vibrates too much. Take some tape and put it on her breasts and hold her down. I'm like, no, you can't say stuff like that, Thomas.
No.
And he would sit there and say, sounds like a broken down Italian soprano, or he would listen to somebody else and said, the way she sings, she should be thrown over a wheelbarrow and beaten with a board. I mean,
My goodness. That's
so
right.
the recording department, what exactly, how do they answer that? If you think about it. And so he basically tore his company to pieces, although he was a devotee of the finest sound. And there really is no better sound than the Edison disc.
True.
Acoustic.
That's right. That's right.
It's incredible. It's just, you get too famous and you can't let someone else do what they should be doing. He had
Right.
Victor Herbert as his director of artists and repertoire for a while.
That's right. That's right.
Very wow. Because Victor Herbert told him, basically, you have no idea what the hell you're talking about. And that's something Edison couldn't handle. And so they went to war. It was like a precursor of World War One. The German.
That's right. That's right. That's a good way of putting it. I love that.
They're starting screaming at each other, and Herbert basically told him what to do with his phonograph, what to do with his records, and what to do with his opinion, and vowed never to make another record, and he never did. For Edison.
Yep.
And then Victor, of course, fine until radio came out.
Yep. And big in the mid-20s, the radios.
Radio was hated by Eldridge Johnson.
Yes.
He considered it an interloper. And for once, Eldridge Johnson and Thomas Edison were in agreement.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I mean,
and yeah,
they
and
both
it wasn't in the both of them in the late 20s. They both caved in and started making the radio phonographs.
To their chagrin.
Yes.
I remember once again to bring up Charlie. He pulled out a paper for me one day, and he said, "Read this." And I started reading it. It was a note by Thomas Edison to his son Charles. And he said, "Charles, as soon as this radio craze is done, everybody will come back to the acoustic phonograph." He couldn't have been more wrong.
Yeah.
But that's the way he thought. And Theodore, who was a lot more far-thinking than those two, actually. I mean, he was pushing for radio. And basically tried to convince his father, which was next to impossible.
Yeah.
And they bought a company called the Splitdorf Radio Company in Newark, New Jersey, that was $2 million in debt. No, the Edison Company at that time was millions of dollars in debt with their recording. They
Right.
took on the Splitdorf and they started making spark plugs and radios, and that was their foray. They made a great mistake, and I'm going into this too much, but they made a great mistake. They were offered when RCA was being created to be a part of it, and they declined. Also, much earlier, Thomas Edison was offered basically major controlling stock of Columbia.
That's
So
true.
he
That's true.
could have controlled the cylinder industry completely and also had a foray with patents to do the lateral record. But no, you know.
I know. That's right. People don't realize these things. And going back to the early days of early days of sound recording, um, it was so funny how I look back at the old antique, like the really early models of home phonographs, going back to home entertainment. Um, Charlie Hummel, he has the first graphophone ever offered, and number one, model one.
Yeah. You can't get anything earlier.
The best part about it is that it is strikingly similar to a sewing machine, and it was powered by a foot treadle. And you would look at it, and I remember seeing an old advertisement for the Model One, and it shows the guy with a typewriter to his right and the Model One speaking into it, you know, and you see these things, and it was just so inventive. And the things that it was interesting how phonographs transitioned. And another thing, speaking of radios, some of the first home graphophones were battery powered, because this was also during the electricity craze of the 1890s, of course.
Of course, a
Um,
battery in those days is something very different.
Probably about the size of a modern computer. They're very large, and they.
Since
Yep, exactly. Yep, you had to pour all these things. And actually, something interesting, the electricity craze. There was a company, Banjo, the Fairbanks Electric, that was the model, Electric Fairbanks Banjo, and it electrified the sound of playing banjo. It was a classical
I'm
banjo.
curious now. I have to ask.
What, what's that? Yeah.
What year is this banjo?
1890s, like 1895, 1894.
So it electrified the sound. Where did it electrify it? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
That I know, that was the whole gimmick, is that it never actually electrocuted anybody. The sound was electrified because it was just, they took advantage of the electricity craze of the 1890s and said it electrified the sound of banjo playing, which was silly. And you know, banjo tying into acoustic recording, that's a whole story within its own. But
Okay. Magnetic
so
belt. Okay.
yeah, right. We talk about early cylinder, but something really interesting is that me and Wyatt were at dinner one day, um, early into our friendship actually, and he was mentioning how he uh, heard of these early Berliner tests, and the Berliner tests are really. Have you heard them, Jack? The early Berliner tests? You haven't? They're really remarkable because um, one of them was Emil Berliner and his son. They
Oh,
were
wait. Yes, I have heard. Yes, yes. Okay, yes, yes. Okay.
Yeah. So him and his son are testing the machine, and they, it's remarkable actually. It's playing. Emil Berliner is talking, and then you hear what? That's the machine stopping. They just stopped it and then played. You hear what right when they start the machine. So blah 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 blah. That's it stopping, and then blah 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 blah. And it's just like, and it was actually pretty interesting how quickly and it started and stopped. Because usually when you turn on a phonograph, it takes a little while for the turntable to start spinning. But you can hear in the recording, it's really interesting how quickly it turns on. And
those are the early days.
the early days, that's right.
And it goes, as the old saying goes. I mean, here's an interesting thing just to toss into to mix with what you were saying, is during Caruso's first recording session, it was somewhat of a production line and done very quickly. They had Caruso sitting there smoking a cigarette, waiting, and then they had the pianist, and then they had the recording person getting the wax ready. And so they hit the wax, tell the piano player would look at Caruso, put out the cigarette, sing the song, and then they would start, he would sing, and there were all kinds of mistakes made because they were rushing through. In one
That's
recording, the piano player is playing the intro. Caruso doesn't realize it's the intro and starts singing in another key in another part of the song. Now, this goes on for basically 2 phrases, and then eventually they meet. And they take off and they're fine. That was released.
Mm-hmm. Which song was it, Jack? Do you remember which opera was it?
Lune di Stelle. And so the piano player is playing here, and he's singing this, and Caruso, you can say, is going, that's not right.
No, and they meet in the middle, you know.
Anything else, that's not right. And then eventually they get together. It's really quite fascinating. I mean, just a few years later, that would be tossed in the garbage.
Yep, that's right.
But he's still at the age where this is amazing just to hear him, whatever key he's singing, you know.
Of course, it doesn't matter. The you know, right. And if you've seen, there's this wonderful film from the 40s that I've actually just recently. It's like late 40s, early 50s, I believe. I'm pretty sure it's called His Master's Voice, and they show an opera singer singing Der Meistersinger, you know, and there's a quote from that. He said, "Oh, I didn't like how I sang that," and his associate said, "Don't worry about how you sing it. All the people care about is hearing noise coming out of a box." And it's true. And that was the whole wonder. And this is, as we reach just past the half an hour mark, this is exactly what we're talking about, is that the wonder that these machines created and how humanity changed around these machines is truly fascinating if you research it further and further.
And I guess we should basically keep it to around a half an hour here. We don't want to make it too long and drive you all crazy. But the thing is that, in closing, if I may say, that, as I said initially, that sound recording is a changing part of human culture. And it's become such a part of our culture, we don't even realize it. And
That's right.
The wonder that initially those squawking sounds, if you read stuff from the Fabulous Phonograph, it says the sound of a Berliner sounds like a free lunch counter. And of course, Gillette writes back, what does a free lunch counter sound like? But the thing is that sound recording, it was a baby. We were listening to the cries of a baby. That's all it was. And
That's right.
they're very uncontrollable, you know, and they do kind of different things. And Caruso singing in different keys, you know, that's part of growing up. And if you listen to Caruso in 1918, 1920, you listen to a refined artist who was singing and also working with a system, although still acoustic, was remarkably advanced. And
That's right.
even to this day, 2023, his records are still for sale. I mean, his CDs, he still sells. and he is a member of RCA for perpetuity. So his family's still making money. It's pretty
True.
amazing.
That is amazing.
It's pretty amazing if you think about it. But he's on every form of recording. And can you just imagine what's going to be coming around the corner in, 15, 20 years? And
right.
I mean, I'm going to sit there and flatten my derriere just looking at it, the new stuff. And of course, the young kids will sit there and say, "What's wrong, Pops?"
Right. Exactly.
And it's wonderful. So,
Absolutely.
talking a lot here. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. We're going to close this episode right now. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to more in the very near future. We're going to have a regular schedule, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, we have lots of things to talk about and to share with you. And once again, if you have ideas, if you have thoughts, if you have questions, leave them in the messages. Let us know. And then we can kind of do things that would please you.
Absolutely. And if you,
So
absolutely.
I will see you. I'm flying away tonight, so I'll be
That's
back
right.
in 2 weeks. Okay. Take care.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.